Oh shit, it's been 5 months, hasn't it? Well, since then I am able to go back to normal school now. So back in boarding school, I'm able to go to a normal high school now. I moved to Whitewind, as you can already tell. Let me show you around. My bedroom here, then my lounge room, then over here, balcony and a balcony, yo. Then down here, kitchen, then table, chair area. Then the balcony out here, of course. On Monday, today's Friday, on Monday is my first day at my school. My new school. I just started, you know what I mean, I just got booked today. You know what I mean, shit, man. Press play, have fun for a day.
Couldn't have noticed or heard two little girls banging and kicking the door and screaming like that. But now, we had been in there for about 25 minutes.
Yeah,
it was now so hot in this sauna that it was hurting to breathe. It felt like my lungs were on fire. My eyes and skin were burning, and we sat back down and put our towels over our heads because they were still a little bit damp and it made it easier to breathe. I was so worried about my cousin, as she is a couple of years younger than me, and I looked at the clock and saw that we had been in there for 35 minutes now. I got up and walked to the door again and saw the lifeguard still just staring straight ahead. Again, I tried to get her attention by screaming that we needed out and banging on the door as hard as I could, but still nothing. I was starting to get pretty dizzy at this point, so I went to go and sit back down, but the wooden seats of the sauna burned my skin. My towel was completely dry, so I put it underneath me to sit on. My hair was also dry, but I wrapped it across my face to cover my nose, and I squinted my eyes so that they didn't burn as bad, but I still just couldn't watch if anyone walked past the door or anything. It helped a little bit, I'll admit, but it wasn't great. My cousin was lying face down with the towel over her head, not moving or saying anything, so I nudged her to make sure that she was still okay. She was, but I could tell that she really needed to get out of there soon because she seemed a bit disoriented. It had been about 45 minutes and I was extremely nauseous. There was no way that the lifeguard would forget that we were in there, and I thought that she would have come back soon, but there was this little voice in my head telling me that maybe she purposely locked us in there. Finally, though, a man walked past the door towards the pool, but for some reason I just couldn't get up. My whole body was on fire and I felt so dizzy. Luckily, this man wasn't going to the pool. He, thankfully, that she really just left us in there to die. And if so, why would she do that? Especially when she could get the blame. I wanted to share a personal experience that happened to a whole bunch of campers.
One day I want to join the
years ago.
dark
It was a
side.
deaf camp when this happened in the summer, near the end of July. So, something weird, very weird happened here, and I wanted to share this story since it was an old, buried memory that I'd just tucked away. As I said, this is during the summer when it was really hot. The campers all have activities and fun things to do throughout the day, and being up in the
Like
woods
my
and
great-great-granddad,
it gets pretty dark relatively
Anakin
quickly
Skywalker.
around 6 p.m. or so.
He was part of the Siths, but there is no longer Siths here. There's a different group called the Dark Side group. So yeah, there's no Siths
Boys and
anymore.
girls have cabins
Press
for
play
by
again.
gender. So, as the boys, we have more of a rugged
One
cabin
day I
style,
want to join
I
the
should say,
fucking
which is
Siths.
more like a
Not
wood
Siths,
lodge
but the
with
Dark
dark
Side
surrounded
group.
by mosquito mesh,
Take over our
360.
planets.
Our windows
Take over the whole
around the whole
multiverse,
cabin to the
even.
one doorway in and out.
That
There's a
would be
bunch of these cabins
good.
scattered throughout the woods
But until then,
some close to each
I'm
other
just a
and some
stupid
not so
teenager
much.
what goes to school and
Anyways,
shit and boring
One
shit.
night, I noticed the cabin not being used off in the distance.
One
was
day,
just
hopefully.
dancing with lights, white and blue, from the inside. I was yelling out about it, but it was a deaf
I'm
camp, so
hoping
I had to
one
wave everyone's
day
attention to
I
it.
join the Dark
Our cabin
Side
staff
group.
were wondering what we were all seeing. Pretty soon our whole cabin was getting way too excited, so some of them went to the other active cabins to explain what was going on, and they went out to meet some other staff so as to go and see what was happening at the isolated, unused cabin. It was about maybe 6 to 10 campers per cabins, with about 3 staff in each cabin. There were about 6 cabins active out of 9 total, male side cabins that is. With about 20 staff members, the girls' side staff had seen what was going on and joined under the lamppost that we were there outside of, and basically we all just watched as campers from the meshy open-air cabin windows that wrapped around the structure just watched on. These lights were just sort of swirling around inside, almost in a playful manner. But we were watching the whole time, until it just suddenly stopped, and the staff were talking about it and watching from between the cabins the whole time as well, and everyone stopped. Soon they started walking off towards the cabin in pairs of 2, and we never saw the lights again, but we were watching them go to the cabins with their flashlights. Soon they started walking into the woods and separated out like it was a sort of search and rescue style operation, with their flashlights scanning the woods ahead of each of the pairs. A few pairs started moving around sort of erratically until everyone looking around ran back to the lamppost and explained what happened, and the staff went back to their cabins to wait for morning. One of my staff said that he saw something twice the size of him, and he's like 6 foot tall, was the colour of a sort of white-grey colour, and it ran by him so fast that he said that it was just not possible. In other words, it wasn't human. He couldn't make out any features or see any face. He couldn't tell what kind of body it was. He thought that it was like a huge blob or something. Everyone was freaking out by now, and it was happening at around maybe 10:30 or 11 at night. Obviously, nobody really went to sleep that night until morning came, and the people in charge of the camp just telling myself, right, I'm just going to walk to this beach one way until there's no more beach left. I hadn't told anyone where I was going. I hadn't informed anyone of my plans. I wasn't paying attention to the time. I wasn't thinking clearly at all, to be honest. Looking back now, I'm highly aware of the fact that my going off all alone was extremely unsafe on my part. I mean, I was an 18-year-old woman on the opposite side of the world from her family. I'd left in such a hurry that I didn't even think that I'd taken a phone with me, to be honest. So, I urge anyone reading this to always keep a phone on you at the very least for safety, and to always let loved ones know of your plans, especially if you're within a foreign country and will be going somewhere by yourself. Whilst I know that absolutely anyone can find themselves in danger and that we should always all be aware, I feel the need to stress these points all the more to women. But I digress. So, I walked on and on and on, and I'd taken some decent walks along the beach before, but never this far, never like this. For a while I wasn't even sure if I was going to make it with any light left, but I ended up hitting the end of the beach just as the sun was setting. I remember gazing at its beauty and missing home terribly, craving for the sun to last. But when it went down and the light was pretty much gone, I faced my long walk home. I walked along the sand for a time, but eventually I strayed from the beach and favoured a pathway that ran directly alongside of it. I can't remember exactly what it was that prompted me to do this. However, I know that I didn't plan on sticking to the path the entire way. For one thing, the direction that I was now coming from was not an area that I knew well, and I knew that I was more likely to recognise my whereabouts from the beach once I got closer to my hostel. For another, I remember something that I'd been told by a friend that I'd made when I had first arrived in this area, and it concerned a park that we'd come across whilst on a walk. Although deserted at the time, my friend had told me that the park could actually be pretty sketchy at night, and that certain people tended to do hard drugs there as well. I knew that the park was somewhere within this direction, and so I planned to cut back to the beach long before I ever likely came upon it. Eventually, I reached a part of the pathway where bushes blocked off both the beach to the left of me and the city to the right of me. Feeling rather boxed in and on edge, I sort of hurried along, eager to find a break in the bushes. The pathway was no longer lit at this point, and the darkness had really started to feel suffocating. I told myself not to be afraid, but I was feeling extremely uneasy. I was deeply regretting my decision to do this now, and I just wanted to be back somewhere with light and people. But suddenly, I froze, because there was a figure looming in the darkness, a figure tall and dark. It was so dark that I genuinely didn't see him until he was mere feet away from me, I think. I say him, too, because he was tall with the build of a man. I inhaled sharply. He had his back to me and appeared to be wearing a cloak with the hood pulled up. I stood extremely still, my eyes fixated on this dark back, unable to look away. Had he heard me? Then, slowly, very slowly, he began to turn around. I didn't think that it was possible for my heart to race any faster than it already had, but as I looked into the pitch black hole of the empty hood where this face should have been, I swiftly found out that yes, it was entirely possible. I couldn't breathe now. Despite not being able to make out his face in the darkness, I knew that he was staring straight at me. I could feel it with every ounce of my being. Move, I said to myself. My whole body was on fire with fear. I felt as though I'd been riding on my last inhale for a decade. We stood watching each other in silence. I don't know how long we stood like that, but I said to myself again, move. And something finally kicked in and I bolted hard. I didn't care about my bare feet. I ran as hard and as fast as I could. There's something about fight or flight that truly does take you to new heights, and I didn't turn around to see if he was following me. I simply kept pushing to get away. I finally made it back to the beach and came across a hotel that I recognized. It was still a little ways away from the hostel, but I desperately needed to sit down, and I wanted for it to just be somewhere safe where there would likely be some form of security, and so
if I was there, I would
pushed
kill
into the
that
pool area
fucking
and
thing.
collapsed into a sun chair, shaking.
Why not?
I was still trembling when a kind couple who looked to be in maybe their 50s found me.
Kill
They
that
comforted me and gave
disgraceful
me some fruit
animal.
from their hotel room, I think, and drove me back to the hostel. I won't ever forget their kindness and generosity, too.
Cryptic should
Now,
never exist.
Sometimes I think about the moment that guy turned around, and I wonder about his face. I think about that dark hole that I
Cryptics
saw.
are nothing.
It's wild to think that he's somewhere out in the world being written about now, and despite it being a terrifying encounter at the time, I do hope that if he didn't have sinister intentions, that he's well, wherever he happens to be. I know that that may be an odd thing to say, but you truly never know what someone's going through, you know. I may have stumbled across him at a pretty dark time,
So it's a
or
human.
perhaps there was something
Same
sinister
thing. I would kill that human.
I don't know, because I didn't stick around to find out.
I would.
One thing's for sure, though. I don't think that I'll ever forget this encounter, because it is now burnt into my brain. So, I have a history of sleep paralysis, but it always happens when I'm on my back. It's usually pretty quiet and serene, I guess, but I sometimes would see an abstract human-like figure who was sort of ghost white with long black hair and appeared to be female. It used to creep me out a lot, but I've learned to just keep my eyes closed and fall back asleep. It was a huge comfort once I got a little bit older too and realized that there really was actually nothing threatening about these episodes and that it was basically just a harmless hallucination. I learned to recognize my sleep paralysis and cope with it, so it was no longer a stressor for me. Now, fast forward, and I was in college at this point, living at home with my parents and two of my brothers. I had fallen asleep in the family room, which was sort of like an extra open space that we used as a playroom growing up. My parents' house was built in the 70s, and at one point, an addition to the house was added by previous owners.
Let's pause it. Let's go chill somewhere for the day. Why not, right? Oh, right, downstairs is this way. Cool. Forgot. Here we are. Let's go chill somewhere. Actually, no, yeah. I'm gonna chill down here. I'm gonna chill over until here pretty much. Sit down. Sit down over here. Press play. How blonde.
That's where our family room is, along with an additional bedroom in the back corner and the laundry room too. And I had fallen asleep on the couch back there. It faced the entrance of the family room, and from here you could see the kitchen and part of the living room. I was having a perfectly normal dream when suddenly the dream was sort of abruptly changed. Metaphorically, it felt like I had been casually watching cartoons when sort of like a broadcast alert interrupted the program to bring the viewers terrible news. I don't remember much about the dream, just a few details like, well, one, it was Christmas. The lights were off, but the Christmas tree illuminated things enough to see. Two, it was a different house, yet the view from my sleeping position could sort of overlay the view of the dream perfectly, if that makes sense. Like, the layout of the dream was built upon what my sleeping eyes were looking at in real life. Three, there was a very unhappy or angry little boy. He was very small for his age and skinny. His head was too large for his body, and he was wearing a helmet of sorts. I got the impression that maybe he was sickly and was wearing the helmet for medical reasons or something. Then, in real life, I was awakened by the entire house shaking. Now, I don't live in a place that has earthquakes, so this immediately freaked me out. It was insanely loud, too.
Play the game and win. Jimmy's bringing more than $5 million in prizes, plus a $4,000 cash draw every week.
I could hear the windows rattling and could feel everything rumbling around me. I was unable to move again. The room was dark, but I think there was a weird sort of green glow. I kept hoping that someone would come and get me and save me. And now this part might sound a little bit insane and dumb, I know, but please bear with me. The fear that I felt was very real at seeing something like this that I couldn't explain. There was some kind of monster right in front of me, and it looked like a tangle of limbs and had no face. I felt like it wanted to hurt me, and I was extremely threatened by it. I remember thinking, like, is this actually happening? How am I going to explain this to anybody? I was completely panicked at this point too, but still couldn't move. It's the worst fear that I'd ever felt in my life, in fact, and I don't remember what happened after that, just that at some point I was able to break free, and I ran to the bedroom that was back here with me, and my dad was sleeping in there, and he was the closest person in the house. I woke him up bawling like a baby and trying to explain what just happened. I think that my family thought that I was having a mental breakdown when we all went over it again the next day. And, to be honest, I still have no real explanation for that night. Like I said before, I know my body and I know my sleep paralysis episodes, but this felt like something different. I was on my stomach when it happened too, not my back. I also distinctly felt like a foreign presence had entered the room that night and terrorized me. This wasn't just my brain this time, I think, and this was something else entirely. It's never happened again since then too, but my family and friends all agreed that this edition of the house never felt quite right, especially at night. After this, I decided never to sleep back there again and have been fine ever since then. Whenever we do have guests, they always feel anxious sleeping back there, and some have reported having unusual or sort of disturbing dreams when sleeping back there. Now, I'm not usually quick to believe in paranormal explanations for stuff like this, but there is a small detail that is likely unrelated, but I thought that it would be interesting to mention. A few years later, once all the kids moved out, my mum started remodeling the house at one point. They knocked a wall down, and inside was a mummified kitten, alongside of a vintage black and white photo of a girl. It freaked the contractor out, and they decided to throw it away, but my brother sent me a picture of it before doing so. It's the front and back of the photo, and also I don't have the photo of the poor kitten for obvious reasons, and even if I did, I wouldn't feel comfortable sharing it. I love animals, and especially cats, so I was very saddened when I heard about it being found that way. I can only hope that it had a natural and peaceful passing, and that It wasn't like abused in any way, but finding it there in the wall like that, I don't know, that seems pretty sketchy. I still get teary-eyed though when remembering this incident due to how confusing and scary it was for me, and also just how sudden and unexpected it was.
Let's push it. Head inside. Close the shop. Where do I put this? It's fucking there. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Exit. Let's go upstairs. Go to my bedroom. Head to bed. I guess I'll see you. I guess I'll see you in the morning. Good night, yo. It's another day. Let's go chill out here, do. Press play.
Workers was the worst experience that I'd ever had. That was paranormal, hands down. But in order to properly explain this part to you, I sort of have to explain a couple of things about the restaurant kitchens to you. So bear with me. So, in a typical restaurant kitchen setup, you have a cook line. And the cook line is, well, literally that. A line as in skinny walking or standing space, typically between the oven, fryers, and the cooktop, with the prep surfaces and small fridges on the opposite side, leaving about maybe 3 to 4 feet or walking aisle forming a cook line. Besides that, there's a dishwasher outside of that line, followed by the rest of what you'd expect to find in a restaurant kitchen. You know, like fridges, freezers, all on a large scale too. You also have your giant hood fans above the cook area, and a hot water heater too. The reason why I point all of this out is because together, they all constantly make noise. Think like louder ambient background noise constantly. So, this one day, there are 3 of us working in the kitchen. Me, my boss, and another employee on the dishwasher. My boss and I were on the cook line while the dishwasher was a few feet away from the cook line, and we were all 3 working as normal when all of a sudden it just got really quiet. Think of when you don't realize you'd been hearing a sort of constant low sound until it suddenly stops, and then you notice the sudden change in the noise environment. This was like that. Except for, it absolutely got dead silent. Almost like an invisible soundproof blanket got thrown over the 3 of us. And as soon as I noticed it, I looked around at the other 2 and they also looked puzzled. What the heck, I questioned out loud. Why is it so quiet all of a sudden? I asked the dishwasher guy suspiciously, and he said, I don't know. My boss replied the same thing too, drawing out her words nervously as well. She turned to face me as I was standing directly behind her in the narrow cook line. Hey, Nora, go make sure that the fridges and the hood fans are still running. Maybe the power's out. So I ventured the 10 or so feet to outside the cook line area, and weirdly enough, suddenly I could hear the hood fans and even the dishwasher, hot water heater, and all the fridges and freezers running like normal. I went back to my boss and, with a sort of confused look, told her everything's working fine. And that was the first creepy part of that, but when I stepped back onto the cook line to tell my boss, everything went silent again. Well, Nora, get back to work grilling those peppers, I guess, she snapped. So I got back into the cook line beside her. After a couple of minutes, though, I suddenly started to get tunnel vision and I felt really dizzy and nauseous. I told my boss, and she told me to go and sit out back for a few minutes and get some fresh air, which I promptly did. As I was sitting outside trying to feel better, I could see my boss go into her office, which was kitty corner from the back door. Since the back door was open with just the screen door closed, I was able to hear her while she made a phone call. But she sounded urgent and shaky as she asked the person on the other end of the line to please bring an abalone shell, some sage, and some kind of weird oil. Now, the reason that she needed those particular items was because, according to her, she had felt something walk through her on the cook line that wasn't good. And the terrible part is that I was standing right behind her, inches away on that cook line. I waited for her to finish her phone call and return to the cook line before I went back in. By the time that I got back, everything sounded normal again on the cook line, which was just so bizarre. When I got off my shift about maybe an hour later, believe me when I say that I made the normally 45-minute drive home in just under 30 minutes. All night that night, I tossed and turned, unable to really sleep. But the few times that I managed to slip into sleep, I kid you not, I got jolted right back awake because I would see a screaming demon-like thing right in my face every time that I fell asleep. I still don't know if that's related, or maybe it was the adrenaline in my body that was keeping me awake with bad thoughts or something, but whatever it was, that day has got to be one of the weirdest experiences that I have ever had. When I was like 16 or so, I'm now 24, female from England, I was sat in my conservatory on the phone to a friend. My conservatory looks out onto my decking, which is followed by my garden. My mum was out in the garden hanging the washing out, and my dad was sat gardening slightly further up. I could see them both. On my decking, we have a large wooden table and a bench set for sort of hosting outside with. You can see through the wood of the benches as there are gaps between the panels. And now, this next part makes me sound so crazy, but I know that I saw it, and I just cannot explain it, and it drives me nuts. So when I got off the phone with my friend, I saw an extremely pale, disembodied hand pop up from behind the top of the back bench. It just shot up, fingers spread wide, kind of like jazz hands, I guess. It then started frantically waving at me, and then put its index finger into a point gesture, and started rotating its wrist really fast, and then would point left and right and then back to a wave. The whole ordeal lasted about maybe 10 seconds, and I must have blinked, and then it was gone. I could see, though, that there was no one there, and I sat in complete shock for about a minute, wondering what the heck I just saw. My parents, who were busy, were also oblivious to this happening. I walked out to the garden soon after. I was so on edge and mouth wide open and stuff, and mentioned it to my mum, who I think just thought that I was making things up. I'm really not sure, but I've mentioned it since, and the more I've spoken about it, the more I think that she believes me, because what a random and specific thing to lie about, right? I didn't even bother telling my dad because I knew that he wouldn't believe me for a second. But I think about this situation regularly and have moments where I question if this was just my imagination, as it really just makes zero sense. Plus, nothing has happened to me like this before or after this event too. Somehow, though, I know deep down that I saw this disembodied hand as clear as day. It also started to swirl in the middle slightly, and that was when my connection just fell flat. I got the beeping sounds that you get when you lose connection, and my phone call was now gone. No more bars and no more data. Nothing. But my AirPods were still buzzing like crazy in my ears. That was when I felt uneasy, neck hair standing up, cold sweats on my back, and I started turning around to leave because the way ahead just seemed a lot more dark and sinister than my way back. And the moment that I turned around and started, well, slightly jogging back because I felt scared, was when I started to hear what I can only describe as like bell sounds. Almost like church bells, but the sound was deeper. That sort of typical ring that you hear after a bell sound was just struck in the air, and it was giving me this weird sensation as if my bones were suddenly rubbing up against each other. It was extremely freaky, and all I remember is that I started to go from walking back to jogging back to running back, trying to leave the forest and go back to the fields where you start this journey. I didn't look back while running, but I could hear the bell sound getting weaker the further away that I got, and the fog-like clouds that I saw before were becoming less and less until I finally left the forest and I was back to a normal sky, thin clouds and the moon. Once I got back home, I simply undressed, went into the shower, and after that, I went to bed, thinking that I was just simply spooked or something today, or Maybe I was just exhausted and my brain went haywire or something. I let it go. But I don't know. I never saw a cloud like that in my life, and the church bells are not a thing late at night inside a abandoned forest like this too. I never went back to hike that route again, and I never told anyone because, well, it's pretty embarrassing to share something like this, right? But I had to think of it today, and I thought that I would share it in the hope that maybe someone can tell me what this is. About 3 years ago, I was 38 weeks pregnant. My husband and I, we lived in what we called our village, and it was basically 2 dead-end streets off of a highway with forest beyond the streets, at the end of them that is, and a small local store at the corner of one street. We called it the village because our trailer park neighbours were my aunt, uncle and cousin's trailer, and then my husband's brother and nieces. Then my grandma's house was on the next street over. My other aunt, uncle and cousins lived with her at the time as well, and my husband and I were 21 then. So, my best friend Ray was visiting from college and had spent the night with me. The next day, we decided to walk up my street, down the highway past the store, then down by my grandma's street and back through the woods to my house. This was to try to help to get labour started, as my pregnant belly was huge at that point and my back hurt often. We were talking while I sort of hobbled with her down the highway when a white truck rode by rather slowly. A white man, maybe in his 50s, sort of rubbernecking at us. At this time it looked like there might have been someone else in the passenger seat too. The truck was kind of old, but I didn't know the year, make or model or see the plate or anything. Ray was talking and unbothered until I said, "Hey, that guy just went by really slow and I don't think that was anyone that I know." She replied with something like, "Oh, I didn't even notice that." We were now halfway to the store as well, and it was less than 2 minutes later when we saw him coming back from the other direction. I said, "Hey, that's him again. Get in the grass." Since we were on what would have been the right side, we went down the slope of the grass off the road. We're still in front of the people's houses because the section of the highway is sort of lined with residences between the dead-end streets. He passes us slowly again. When I turn to look behind us, he's slowing down even more, finds a spot and starts to turn the truck around. I told Ray to run, so we ran, and I was doing the best that I could, being super pregnant. We thought about going into the store, but decided to head for my grandma's up the other street instead. Her house was up the hill at the end, but it wasn't a long run by any means. When we got up the hill, I looked back again to see his truck pulling into the store parking lot. We continued to run, got to my grandma's where she and my aunt were sitting at the table and told them what just happened. My aunt made a police report. I was afraid to at first, thinking that maybe I was just being paranoid. I mean, what if it was someone that I knew and they were just trying to say hi and maybe it was just a waste of the police's time? Turns out, though, that there had been other reports of a man creeping around the neighbourhoods. Someone in another trailer park down the highway reported that her kids were outside playing when a man emerged from the woods trying to lure one of them to him. They hollered for their mum and supposedly she came out and threatened him, so he ran off. But it continues. You see, a few more times we think that we see this truck, but we're not sure if it's him, since one of the residents also has a white truck too. My family had yet to see the truck, so they couldn't identify it. But at some point when I wasn't home, a few of my cousins were playing outside. Their ages ranged from 10 to 15. And this time, the truck came rolling down our little street past them. He turned around at the end, came back up and stopped next to them. They said that he was apparently trying to lure my 11-year-old cousin to the truck. But he said no, and they all ran back to my aunt's house. We had talked with the children about what was going on in the neighbourhood lately, so thankfully they knew what to do. One more thing happened though before the report stopped. I had my baby at 40 weeks, and my husband and his friend, the baby and I, were home one day. The baby was about a week old, when we got a call from my aunt at my grandma's house that they had seen the man real up close and personal. My 2 female teen cousins were in their room. It was getting dark out, but for some reason my cousin went out to open the blinds to the window, and there was the man squatting on the AC unit staring at them. They screamed and he jumped off and ran into the woods behind the house. My aunt called the police. My husband and his friend later went out with guns and flashlights to search for him in the woods, but they didn't find him. I believe that he was parking his truck somewhere and then stalking houses from the forest perhaps, but my husband and I actually used to walk through those woods and never had any issues as it was private land that we had permission to walk on. But it also seems that this man did not have a preference for age or gender or anything. He seemed to be looking for anyone that he could get for whatever sick reason that he had in mind. But there had been police sent to patrol the highway or sit on the side of the road waiting since then, keeping an eye out for him throughout those weeks, but they never did catch him. I still wonder sometimes, though, if he was someone from out of town, and I hope maybe somewhere he gets busted before something bad happens. We might never know, but I truly do hope for it. To set the scene, it was November 27th, and I'm walking through the woods to avoid interacting with guests, like the average antisocial teenager that I am. I have one of my uncle's dogs with me, Duke, a 150-pound Great Dane. We were passing through a clearing at the time and taking a walk. I state the size and breed of the dog to demonstrate how out of character his behaviour will be too. But as we get about halfway through the clearing, he begins to walk slower and sort of begins to whine a bit. I assume that he must have hurt his paw or something, so I check him over but find nothing. I turn around and in my flashlight beam I can see a pair of eyes about maybe 4 feet off the ground, significantly taller than anything with eye shine in my area. I understandably freak out at this and start to back away a bit. But then, the most horrifying thing happens. Whatever it was, it stands up. Whatever was watching me is now over 6 feet tall easily, and then it seemed to talk. It said help, I think, with no emotion or cadence behind it. Duke is losing his mind trying to get away, and I decide that that's a pretty reasonable plan at this point. As we're running through the forest trying to get back to our house, I can hear this thing saying help, help, help over and over again, always with about 5 seconds apart. We eventually make it back to the house and we immediately get inside. For the next few nights, if I looked out my window, I could have sworn that I saw those same eyes gazing back at me from those woods. I don't know what it was. I've heard stories of skinwalkers, wendigos, or whatever it is, but whatever it was, I hope that I never see it again. To answer some questions as well that I'm sure you'll have, this occurred in northern Oklahoma. There was no discernible gender to the voice that I could make out. There was no discernible evidence when I went back the next day as well to have a look around. No footprints and nothing that I could spot anyway. But then again, I'm definitely no tracker or anything. So there recently was a thread on Reddit about what made you believe in ghosts, and I'll start with the same context many probably have said before, but I was an extremely skeptical individual. I believe that the majority of events that occur can be explained by logical explanations or something other than the paranormal. That was, until both myself and wife had our experiences with several unexplained events. I want to context that these events have changed both my wife and myself's views on many things, including the paranormal. These events took place around maybe 6 years ago now. So my wife and I were staying at my father's house after he passed away. Everybody in the family spoke about the house being haunted as long as I can remember. Personally, I'd never had anything weird happen prior to this, and overall just chalked it up to that side of the family being overzealous storytellers. But we were at the house for around a week to help clean it out, as it was around 6 hours away from where we lived. And there were several weird events leading to the final event that changed myself and wife forever. To give better context, the house itself was a postage stamp-style Victorian house, with 2 floors and a semi-finished apartment-style attic. I was going up into the attic to work on cleaning out some stuff my father had up there. He was an avid collector of NASCAR die-cast, and other collectibles and things were pretty much everywhere. On my way up the steps, I was on my phone with my wife, who had went to get some food, when I saw the handle on the attic door twist and the door slightly open. This area where we're in is not necessarily dangerous, but was far from nice, and I instantly thought that somebody had broken in and immediately ran up to investigate. I searched everywhere, and I couldn't find anyone. In retrospect, I know it was idiotic to go up there alone, as if someone was up there. I was not prepared to handle it or anything.
Yeah, no
The grief
shit.
makes emotions just dull, I guess, including fear. The second event was that my wife, myself, and my childhood friend were in the same attic cleaning out items. In the attic, there was this thick old shag carpet that had been there from like the 70s. Since it was a semi-finished attic, one room was for storage and is where my buddy was working. I look at my wife at some point, who literally just points at the door. And we both watched the door for that room close slowly on my buddy. But there was zero reasoning or explanation for how this happened. As we both saw it, and the door itself took a large amount of force to actually close it.